Hello, everyone. Welcome to Soul Sessions. I'm Deborah Burnt-Maldonado.
Welcome back. I'm Dr. Rob.
And we are excited to continue our series on yoga philosophy.
The four yogas.
Four yogas.
Yes. And really, we have Swami Vivekananda to thank for the concept of the four yogas. Mm-hmm. He's got these incredible books on all the yogas. So if you're interested in the topic and want to go deeper, his books definitely recommended.
And so let's do a little review. We talked about karma yoga.
Yeah, so karma yoga is the idea of selfless action, and as a way of practicing the discipline of yoga to purify your mind, to purify your karma, essentially. That's why it's called karma yoga. You're burning up your karma as you take action in the world.
And when we talked about karma, we're really talking about our attachment to the material, the physical world, and that attachment creates the suffering.
In part, it's also the conditioning that the environment has on us.
Because we're attached to it, the pleasure.
Right. That's right. And so selflessness, or egolessness, I would say in this case, allows us to act in the world without incurring more karma. And it also liberates us from conditioning. So it's a beautiful way of working. And it's the most accessible, I think, to us in the West, because we're always acting, like we're into taking action. Everything is about acting,
we're not sitting in a cave somewhere.
Yeah, and I don't think it's realistic for us to think about sitting for 20 years in a cave.
Or even meditating for 4 hours a day. Some people tell me they meditate for hours. I'm like, how do you get any work done? And, what do you do? So, but yeah, the average person, we're busy. We have our lives. We want to have love and success and all the things that life brings us. But we also, karma yoga helps us take all those things and how do we apply it in that everyday life? And Bhakti yoga is one of my favorites, but it's not as practical as karma. It's a devotional yoga.
Yeah, I think it's the most familiar to people because, especially in the West, we are used to thinking in terms of devotion and belief and kind of the passion of the, let's say, the religious intention. As a way of developing your spirituality, but from the Vedic perspective, it's only one of the schools or one of the paths, and all these paths lead to the same place, but they start off in very different kind of directions. Where in karma yoga you're talking about selfless action, in bhakti yoga you're talking about devotional service, developing a passion for the divine and cultivating that, actively cultivating that.
Prayer and dedication and a lot of religions teach in that Bhakti yoga.
Yeah, definitely.
Philosophy.
Christianity is that pathos of, strong passion. We talked about that.
The passion of the Christ.
Yeah, and the image of Jesus having his heart on fire, those kind of
Or
images.
even Mother Mary, having that, like her as an image that we love and adore, and she's looking. We devote ourselves, and in yoga they talk about the Divine Mother in Vendanta. The Divine Mother is there, and also Earth is our mother. So we think about those of you who are into, hopefully most of you are into saving the planet and the environment. That is Bhakti yoga. You're loving this kind of the divine in the world, and you're wanting to bring love into the world and care for animals and people like that. We talked about St. Francis, and he was also the patron saint of animals and very devotional and loving. So
yes, and of course we want to, let's say, position our talk because we're talking in terms of Jungian psychology. So Jung's model allows us to talk about a spiritual psychology without necessarily leaving the realm of philosophy.
And I find that it's so interesting because all through my personal growth journey since I was in my 20s, I always had like the spiritual work and then the psychology of attachment, and it was almost like compartmentalized a lot of my learning, and we hear a lot of our students say that, like they get pieces here and there. And then the Jungian really puts it all together, because it's Jungian spiritual psychology, where we're taking that beautiful understanding of the psyche, which actually means soul, and we're bridging in that collective unconscious, which is that universal self, the bigger concept of who we are. And we looked at all the different philosophies, Vedanta seems to have the most like cleanest interaction or integration into the Jungian. And he read a lot of Vedanta, Eastern philosophy, and talked a lot about it in his work. So these go very well together.
Yes, and we also emphasize that we're talking about the philosophy. So if there are, say, Vedantists out there or Hindu practitioners, we hope you understand our talk in the right context, that we're not talking about the religion. It's a different path. But we're talking more about the philosophy and its relevance to how we live today.
And even in Vedanta, there's so many different the schools of Vedanta too. So everyone has their path. But I think no matter what you read, a lot of it has the same like undercurrent. Like they all read the Gita and the Vedas, and there's just different interpretations and applications. So let's talk about one of my favorite. I mean, I think Jnana Yoga has always been my favorite, and I don't know if it's because I like to learn things intellectually. Like it's so, like I don't want to learn by doing. I want to like figure it out first. I'm very like some people, many of you are probably very self-reflective and have that self-inquiry. Jnana Yoga is perfect for that, I think.
Yeah, and before we get into it, let's put it in context, because this knowledge that we're going to be talking about, this higher knowledge, was, let's say, developed and expounded from a very different perspective than the way we see the universe now, especially in Western culture. Let's say our paradigm, the way our worldview of the universe is materialistic, not in the negative sense.
Not ours. As far as me,
no, I mean in our Western culture, it's materialistic in the sense that we consider the material to be real. Whatever is matter to us, that's what matters. That's what we think is real. That's
the evidence of the senses.
Yeah, the evidence of the senses,
which is what science is based on. Like that kind of idea is scientific. It's observing the material, and its functions and its reactions.
And this knowledge really came about from a very different paradigm, very different perspective and worldview. It was the worldview of consciousness, that the universe is more of a big idea, not a big machine that's made out of material. It's more illusory. It's arises in consciousness and appears to us as material, but it's a very different way of perceiving the universe. And so if you want to understand Jnana Yoga, you have to adapt that perspective so that you can understand what they meant by this higher knowledge.
And so Jnana, what does it mean?
So Jnana is knowledge, or it can be translated as knowledge or wisdom, the discipline, right? Because Jnana Yoga is an internal discipline of the mind. Some people translate it as logic or reason, but it is that kind of cultivating the understanding of what is the nature of our mind and what is the nature of reality.
So when we do practice karma yoga or devotional yoga, the Jnana Yoga, the understanding helps us why we're doing it this way, and then in effect also studying the higher knowledge, which some people that's all they do. Like you talk to an academic, they're always studying knowledge, but they don't have that real life experience. So you want to always bridge in that real life experience, but you can actually reach higher states of consciousness just by wrestling with your own mind and your own internal questioning of what is reality. And I guess that's the question that Jnana Yoga answers is, what is reality? And that's because you can practice devotion, you can act non-attached, but what is this reality that we're actually interacting with? Like, who am I, and what is this soup that we're living in? And that's really what we need to know, or it doesn't make any sense, really.
Yeah.
Or we're just following what other people say, do this ritual and you'll go to heaven one day, and you're not really understanding, what the mechanism is.
Yeah, in that respect, this is a very practical approach, because if you don't understand what you're dealing with, or if you're misperceiving what you're dealing with, you're going to waste a lot of time, which is impractical. So practicality, although a lot of this knowledge sounds very mystical and transcendent, it is very practical in that it gives you a good grounding on what is it that you're dealing with when you say reality. What is it? What is it made out of? What is its nature? So you've been reading Adi Shankara, who is really the main philosopher of Advaita Vedanta, and he talks about these two realities, or two levels of reality.
Yeah, I like this idea because we kind of, I've always heard from all the New Age stuff I've learned over the years, or spiritual work, it's like everything's one, and we're one with everything, and God is within us, and all that stuff. And how does that fit into, well, I have these, struggles in life, and I'm alone, and I'm trying to meet my partner and make it in the world and manifesting, how does this all kind of go together? And I love this, the two realities that we live in is that there's the apparent reality and the absolute reality. And the absolute reality is that oneness, that the truth, the only reality is that we are the divine. But there is this apparent reality that we're living in because we're in what they call Maya, which is the physical manifestation of the world that we're living in. And this Maya creates these sheaths in this body and the soul that encases our individual soul that we have our experience of life in. And it's almost like we need that. I always think of it as the foundation of what we can live from, like the blank screen of a movie, and then the movie's playing, but then the movie disappears, but the blank screen is always there and constant. It's kind of like that, like we're living in a dream, like it's like a dream world. I know it's kind of hard to say, especially when people have had tough times, like this isn't a dream, it feels so real, but it feels so real, just like when you have a dream and you're running away from something and then you wake up and you're like, oh, that was just a dream. It's this quality of this world that we live in is very similar. It's an apparent reality, but we can't deny that it doesn't have any reality because we're experiencing it. And that's the key. It's that we're experiencing something, but what we're experiencing is not as real as we think it is. So when we're in a dream and there's a black bear chasing us, or criminals trying to break into our house, and we're shaking or worried, and then we wake up, it felt real to us. And that's kind of what happens when we are in this body, and when we're not awakened, we believe the dream, and then we get caught up in it and we get attached to it, and we're getting attached to what is the apparent reality versus the true reality. With that said, I do believe that there's a reason why we have this apparent reality, and it is to play with the dance of life. It's to be able to have heartache and pain and sadness when someone passes, and joy when a baby's born, and all these beautiful emotional shifts and tragedies and adventures, and to be in this beautiful world with all the plants and animals. And I mean, it's just so rich. Like, why would we just want to be just the blank screen? We want to have this other experience. So for the enlightened person, they can live in the world with all the heartache and pain, but their mind is not so pulled into it where they're suffering all the time. And there's, like the Buddhists say, the world is suffering, and that's why, because we believe the dream is real. and we could still play in both worlds, but know the truth is that that true self can never be harmed, can never be broken, can never die, can never be born. There's an eternal part of us that kind of gives us a little like, ooh, I have this eternal part, but you know what? I want to play in the world. And that, I think, is the best combination, because it's not that we don't care or we think, oh, this is all fake and not real. There's a real game going on, but it's more of an experience and a journey, and that we should enjoy it and experience it. It's not always supposed to be bliss and happy. It's like the duality is what gives us that experience.
Yeah, that's
a lot of words, but that's my Debbie's and the Debbie Lama's interpretation of reality.
Of Adi Shankara.
Yeah, Adi Shankara, yeah. And I love it because it is that we're to remember that there always is that place where we can never fall, you know? There's no place to fall. Like the self, you are immortal and unlimited, and the beautiful thing that all these teachers tell you, but how do you live in the world and be that divine at the same time? That's the challenge.
Yeah, and the aim of this higher knowledge is really to liberate us. And I know in the West we're used to thinking of this kind of philosophical understanding of life kind of as a very serious and somber thing. But if you notice that playfulness can only really be understood or experienced if you understand that, life is more like a dream. It's more illusory than we think. In other words, it's not as solid as it appears to us.
Like even yesterday, if you think back, there's a lot of things that happened yesterday. What do you remember about it? It's like little snippets, It's just like, and it's like that fleeting, ever-changing world that we're in. That can't be real because it doesn't last.
Yes.
But there's a part of you that remembers there was a yesterday, so that's what's real.
Yeah. So let's break it down to very simple observational things. Mm-hmm. So we all experience the world of objects. Mm-hmm. If we think of the world the way we see it, it's a collection of objects, right? There's a tree, there's a car, there's a house, there's this desk, these things.
There's a body where ourselves are an object.
Exactly. Yeah. But in the perception of an object, that gives rise to the I, or the sense of I, which we call the ego in psychology.
So it's like the subject and object. There's always that kind of interaction.
Yes, because if I look at that cup, then I assume there's a me looking at something else, right? And there's that separation. Mm-hmm. So just the act of perceiving something gives me a sense that thing, that object, is separate from me, and therefore there must be an I. Mm-hmm. But it's an illusion.
It's like I have the body, this name and identity, so I must be real, that I can.
Yes, but if you notice in science, in the Western model, the focus is on the object,
not on the perceiver.
Not on the perceiver, because
except in quantum physics.
Yeah, we'll get to that later. But let's say in basic science, the objective is to figure out what that object is made out of. And so all the focus, most of physics goes into, let's break it down. Let's reduce that cup to its basic elements and to figure out what are the smallest components of that object. And if we get to the very bottom of it, we'll understand. Like that's the paradigm. In the Eastern perspective, again, that different paradigm, that different worldview, the question was not what is that object made out of, is who is the observer? Mm-hmm. Who is observing? So you're turning the light
inside, yeah.
Yes. Who is observing, and what makes that observation possible? So it's a very different question.
And how does that observation impact me, and what does it pull from me, and why? What am I attached to it? Is it beautiful? Is it repulsive? And kind of like, what is my relationship with that object? But from here, not from what is that object, but what is it doing to me?
Well, yes, because let's say the way they reasoned it was that if that object never appears outside of my awareness, right? In other words, for me to observe that object, that cup, I have to be aware of it. If I'm not aware of it, that object never appears. So right there, just by pure logic, we're saying that the observation, the awareness, and that cup are one and the same. They're separate
connected,
them.
Yeah, you can't do. There can't be an object without a subject witnessing it.
That's right.
Like no one can see the cups here because it's below the screen, so you're not having a relationship with that object. But when you lift your cup up, they can see it.
That's right. So they started to think in terms of awareness or consciousness as being the foundational element in the universe, not material like we did in the West, that we were looking for what is that object made out of. In the East, they were looking for what makes that arising of the perception of the object possible. What is that element? And that element, of course, is awareness, what we call consciousness in the West.
Versus that these objects are just there, and then our awareness is observing them.
Yes.
We're saying, no, the object is there because we're observing them. And isn't that what they discovered in quantum physics? When they did the double slit experiment, they said, when no one's watching, it's the waves of the energy are waves, the light beam's a wave, but when it's observed, it becomes a particle. So it's like that kind of interaction with the observer and the object, or this thing becomes, so the wave is undefined, just like almost like pure consciousness. It's just there, and then when we collapse onto it, we make it an object.
We collapse it into its form. And a lot of people take quantum mechanics now to kind of indicate that science is reaching the same level of understanding as let's say, the Vedic knowledge. But I don't think that's true.
They're not close yet, that close yet.
I don't think it's true because it's still the different perspective, a different paradigm. They're still looking for a formula to understand the existence of that object.
Well, they're still thinking that the wave is an object too, right? It's just a different object.
And yes, and another difference is that it's still about an external understanding of the universe instead of a direct experience, which is what Jnana Yoga is about. Jnana Yoga is not about understanding it intellectually and saying, okay, I got the formula down, just like
I studied, I know about the 3 levels of awareness, and I understand, attachment and the theory behind it. Now I can experience it because, you know what I think too, we talked about this the other day, is that, when I used to start, I remember when we first met, I had all the like popular self-help books by all the big names, and I was reading, and it was very, like, I was like, I was doing good. I mean, they made me feel good, but there was something like, it made sense to me. It was like, oh, it makes me feel good. This is rational. This is easy. But when I read Eastern philosophy, you gave me actually the way to Bodhisattva. You gave me the Gita, and I was reading it, and I was like, this is confusing. And that's really where we know that we're really going into another level of knowledge, because you could read all those, really, I mean, there's some good popular self-help books out there, but a lot of them, especially in the industry, me trying to get published again, they want to water everything down. They want to make it like Instagram-y, and then you're getting just the vanilla, sugary kind of coding that feels good to read versus that deep knowledge that goes, ooh, you're resistant to it, this isn't real, and that it's that wrestling with the knowledge, it's that self-inquiry and saying, this doesn't make any sense at all, but let me go into it. Let me try to figure out what this is. That's where we get that. It's something, it's like lights up and reacts something inside versus just smoothing the surface and reminding you what you already know. So when you're reading higher knowledge, you know it because it's almost like you have to read it over maybe 3 or 4 times before you understand what they're talking about, versus something that you read and it's like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. It feels good. You're not really having that critical thinking of let me go deeper into letting it go deeper into my core of understanding. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And now I can't read just the popular books anymore. I'm like, it's like kind of nice, like fun little like spa treatment, but it's not like that deep change of wow, that when I read the direct text of like the Gita, or I read Adi Shankara, it's like, oh wow, like this is really blowing my mind, and that's really what you want.
Yeah.
You don't want to blow your mind in a way, but you know what I'm saying.
Yes. So we make a distinction between lower knowledge and higher knowledge. And lower knowledge is simply all that information that we can process intellectually, like all the facts about the world and the universe and E equals MC squared or anything like that. It's lower knowledge because it's not really teaching us or giving us a direct experience of that oneness of consciousness. It's giving us information about what is that cup made out of again. And wouldn't you say that lower knowledge is sort of like understanding your patterns a little bit? Like I know why I'm fearful of this, or this happened to me, this event happened, and that's why I have this like feeling or emotion. That's more lower knowledge. It feels like higher knowledge for someone who's on that journey, but there's another level, and that level is, okay, we understand how you got here, but then, because it makes sense, right? This happened to me, this is the result. But the higher knowledge is like kind of, well, how do we escape that pattern of conditioning? How do we really free ourselves? Yeah, very much. That's one of the definitions of higher knowledge, is that it's moving us towards the right understanding that the nature of our experience is awareness, it's consciousness. That is the reality, and the only reality. Because if you look, let's say, if I say that cup is real, you know, I can touch it and I can break it and I can do things with it. It's only an apparent reality because it changes over time. It came into being, and then there'll be a point in time where it doesn't exist anymore. So which part of it is the real? You know, if it's always morphing and changing, which part am I saying is a reality? Well, even me, like you met me almost 18 years ago now. I don't even know. Can't keep track. 17 years. And there's nothing of me physically that's the same. But so are you in love with the Debbie that was 41, or you love Debbie that's 50 plus? All of them. All the Debbies. But there was so many iterations of yourself too, as you go through stages of life. So it's like, who is the real you? Like you can even look at your life and see that this temporal body that you're in that changes, that ages, that grows. And like I think about who I was when I was in my 20s, and if I would run into someone that knew me back then, I'm like a completely different person. And so it's like the Debbie that they have in their mind is different than who I am right now. And then who is it? Is that's their reality. And so we have to kind of question of what is, because this world is always changing and we're always changing, that what are we defining and what are we, making that like hard judgments on and limits on. Yeah, which leads us to this idea of, well, what is Jnana Yoga teaching? Or, what is the practice of Jnana Yoga? So it's essentially saying that we create our own suffering by buying into the misinterpretation of things. In other words, if we believe the impermanent, the unreal, is real, then we think the real, which is the awareness, is unreal, right? We doubt our own perception, our own awareness, and we're thinking, no, that cup is more real than my awareness of it. So in the Upanishads, it says, you mistake the real for the unreal, and the unreal for the real. And that causes the suffering. That causes. Now, in very practical terms, I mean, we've worked as coaches for many years now. In coaching, we see that people that give away their power to the external. They think, when things line up for me out there, when I get the right job, when I get the right career, when I get the right money, all these external appearance of things, then I'll be happy. So now practically what's going on there is the person is giving away their power to some external, ever mutating, ever changing reality. That is a mistake, because you're going to suffer. Sooner or later, those things are going to change, or those circumstances are going to, continue to morph.
Well, they're already suffering because they don't think they have it yet.
Yes, that's right. And so when you base your reality on, or your understanding on the real, which is the absolute reality, that awareness, consciousness is the absolute reality in every situation, then you're no longer depending on those external circumstances to make you happy, to give you your sense of yourself and what's true and what's real.
And then you can consciously direct your destiny with non-attachment and all those things that they tell you, that you can create your own reality and all that. That comes after you understand the higher knowledge. But if you're going that I want to create my own reality, but you believe still that finding that partner, making $1 million, getting that book deal, having a successful business, that's going to make you feel solid and calm and happy, then you're really just chasing. It's almost like you can get, and you could acquire all those things, but it'll never be enough. And what I find, what I realized, especially with love, someone looking for a partner to make them happy, that you're giving your power to that person to make you happy, which is a heavy burden on the other person, but also you would fear having them have that hold on you as well. So it's almost like an inner conflict is, I'm giving this person power to make me happy, but then I don't want to give that person power. And so especially for women, we don't want to give away all our power, but we do it. And then we're in this kind of conflict within ourselves of, I want to be with someone, but I don't want to be with someone and then give away my power to them. So the best way to find love or to be successful and abundant is to understand the true nature of who you are. Let go of that attachment, not give that thing so much power, and then it's easy. And then you can enjoy it more. You can enjoy a relationship more. If I woke up every day going, I hope Rob doesn't leave me. I hope Rob doesn't leave me. I hope he still likes me. And everything I did was all about propping you up and putting you on a pedestal, which sometimes it would be a very, it wouldn't matter if I have a partner, I would be miserable in that relationship. It would always be this kind of, and we've all been in those relationships that up and down, like one day it's good, one day it's bad, and it's all like it's like you're like a puppet and the strings are being pulled from the external. Yes. But you're creating that dynamic yourself. It's not out there. You're creating your own suffering, which is really part of, I think, how we've been conditioned in the world early on. I mean, it's not your fault. It's just human nature. That's how we're conditioned, is to the world's out there. We're this helpless little being. But in midlife, that's what Jung says, it's time to individuate and remember and reclaim that we are the source. Yeah. And we're not what happened to us, that we can change and we can become who we really are.
Absolutely. Yeah, so again, this is a very practical philosophy. In other words, it's not just about kind of philosophizing for the sake of thinking and expounding ideas. It's a very practical approach to our human problems. If you misunderstand the nature of your mind and the nature of reality, you're creating your own suffering, continuously creating your own suffering. And it's, if you think about collectively, why are we in such dire circumstances right now? Because collectively, the human race has been moving towards this misunderstanding of the material world, thinking that the objects are going to make us happy, the things of the world are going to be stable and provide some kind of reassurance for us. It's the other way around. The consciousness, our awareness is the absolute reality. When we understand that, then we're not putting that burden on external circumstances to make us happy.
And these events of the world, especially the past year and a half of everything that's been going on with the pandemic, it really makes it's an opportunity for people to see how attached we were to the status quo, to even like not even appreciating connection and spending time with each other, where everyone's looking at their phones, walking down the street so I hope that after this is all over and we go back, we're looking at each other again and we're, valuing human connection, or we're seeing what's important in life. I mean, that's why I think sometimes these things happen, to put us back in balance. It's an opportunity for us to retrieve our little like hooks into the world that pull us and keep us powerless and bring us back. Now, with that said, it doesn't mean that you can't have success and love and all those things, but if you understand the higher knowledge, you can enjoy them more. It doesn't define you. It becomes just an extension of your expression, versus it's like my life raft. If this person comes in, it's like, oh, I got my little floaty now. Yeah, this partner's going to keep me afloat, or this money in this bank is going to keep me afloat. It's like, no, you can swim in the ocean and be like, I'm not going to sink. And I love, all this abundance and this love and these wonderful things I have for myself.
Well, remember the Dalai Lama said the only the reason we suffer as human beings is because of our ego, right? Our over-identification with the ego. So this plays into that very, very nicely, because it's saying, again, if you're mistaking what you're perceiving and you're thinking there's an I observing this and that I is separate from that object, then you're likely to mistreat that object. Now, if you extend that into human relationships, again, we're misunderstanding that I'm connected to that other person. And essentially, we are the same awareness, but because they appear different to us, and if I identify with that difference, then I'm an ego. Mm-hmm. I'm causing suffering not only to myself, but to that other person, to nature, to animals, to everything around me, because of that division, because of that misperception. So when we correct the misperception, then we're able to act in real compassion, in real unity with people.
So what would you say, as we close up, what would be a way for people to practice Jnana Yoga without having to, I definitely recommend Vivekananda's book on Jnana Yoga. It's really great. I read it like 1 million times. I love it. Could read it over and over again. One of the stories in the book, can I share the story about the curly tail?
Sure.
Just to kind of see like his idea of this higher knowledge is, there was this guy, he was hearing that people can have genies, and the genie will give them anything they wanted, and will, is this magical genie. So he went to the guru and he said, I'd like a genie. And the guru was like, nah, you're not ready for the genie. I don't think you should. You don't know what you're asking. He's like, no, please, I want the genie. And he said, well, if you give him the genie, you have to give him something to ask for things every day, or he's going to eat you. He's like he turns into a monster and he tries to eat you. And so the guy's like, oh, that's no problem. I have plenty of things I want that can ask the genie for. So he went and he said, all right. The guru's like, okay, here's your genie. So the genie's like, okay, what do you want me to do? And the guy's like, I want you to make me mayor of the city. And so he makes him mayor of the city. He's like, I want the most beautiful wife in the world. Okay, you got the most beautiful wife in the world. No, I want to be the king of the whole town. Okay, you're the king of the whole town. I want the biggest palace in the world. You have the biggest palace. And they kept asking for all these things. And then finally he really did run out of material things to ask for. And he was just like, okay, I don't know what else to ask for. I have everything material. And the genie's like, you better give me something or I'm going to eat you, because I need to do something. I need to do something. And he said, so he runs to the guru again, and he's like, Guru, you were right. He's going to eat me, this genie. And he's like, okay, son, this is what you're going to do. You're going to find a dog with a curly tail, cut off its tail, and give it to the genie, and ask the genie what his job is to straighten out that tail. And so he goes, okay, and he gives it to the genie. He says, I want you to straighten out the tail. So the genie's like, oh, I have something to do. So he kind of combs out the tail, pulls it all the way out, and then whoop, it flips up again. So the genie's going on. And so that's, and then the genie was satisfied. And it's kind of like the ego. It's always looking for more. And it's like it unties things and then it curls up again. If you look at life, you solve one problem in your life and then it curls up again. And so it's like these material things aren't going to solve that hunger or that kind of ego desire. So it's like understanding its nature, the mind, that that ego mind is always never satisfied, always. It's like you're straightening one tail out and it flips up again. So it's just the nature, and we're fooled to think that one day that tail's just going to be flat and we don't have any problems anymore. And that's not the case. That's not the case.
Not only that, I think if you look at humanity, the way we act collectively, it's not as a consumer. A lot of people think, it's a consumer society and we're kind of invested in doing these things. But no, that's not it. We're acting more as an addicted person.
Yes, yeah.
Very destructive, very kind of consuming without measure. Without consideration for other life forms, or
cutting down forests, dumping. I heard they dumped millions of gallons of DDT in the Pacific right here, right outside our window, and no one cares. It's like, okay, it's like,
no, I think people do care.
I mean, some people care, but
collectively, it appears that like nobody understands how to stop that.
Yeah.
Again, because we're misinterpreting the nature of reality. Mm-hmm. We think the answer is out there somewhere. We have to go
make a law.
Yes, exactly. But it's about changing our understanding of the nature of reality, and Jnana Yoga addresses that in a beautiful way. It's scientific in the sense that we can test it. It's not asking us to believe anything, to take some leap of faith. It's saying, observe the nature of objects, observe the nature of your mind, and you'll find the answer through that.
And so what we need to do is, how do we be in the world without pushing it away and without buying into it? And one of the techniques we teach in our training is in our method is kind of working with the triggers and emotions. So for you at home, one thing you could look at is like when you're hooked into something. You get hooked into something, a disappointment, or you're anxious about something happening, or you're worried. Just sit with yourself and really ask yourself, like, what does this mean? Like, why am I so hooked into it? And you'll notice that it's all about like your ego is like wanting to protect you, or feels like something terrible is going to happen, like you're going to die if you don't have it. And just trying that self-inquiry is really a great way to start seeing that all the perceptions that you're pouring into this event and not buying into it. A great example would be, let's say you get an email from a friend of yours and she writes something and you're triggered by what she wrote, and your mind is making up all this stuff about her, and she's this terrible person, and I can't believe she would say this to me, maybe I shouldn't be friends with her. And you're creating this whole like imaginary world and this monster and this friend. And then when you talk to her, she'd be like, oh no, I forgot to put a comma after that word. I meant you're great, or something. And the person would took it as like condescension, or we've all done that, read the email wrong. And so that's what the mind does. It creates this like false reality. And to remember that most of what we're seeing, even a simple example like that, a misunderstanding, but most of what we're seeing is a false reality of what's real. And we don't want to deny the world because it's an experience. We don't want to deny our feelings because it's an experience. We don't want to deny, terrible experiences that happen to us. It's not about saying it never happened and it's an illusion. But what we're hanging on to in our mind is what is a lot of times exacerbating what really happened. Exaggerating it in a way. Or minimizing it too. We minimize things, and it's just the way the ego works. It has all these cognitive biases that filter in the world. And the Jnana Yoga talks a lot about that modern psychology finally came up with these cognitive biases and how we see the world through filters. But if we look at Jnana Yoga, we're seeing even a deeper misperception of what the world is.
Yes, very powerful stuff.
So starting with the simple, just cognitive biases, you could start, saying this isn't as real as I think it is. And here I am creating this terrible, terrible story and narrative that's not even real.
Yeah, when we misunderstand what we're perceiving, it has power over us. Essentially, it drives the mind. It seizes the mind and takes over us. When we understand what we're perceiving, the nature of our perception, we're able then to let it go if we need to. But also we're able to act, meaning because we're not caught up in it, because it's not driving us, we're able to act appropriately in a much more detached or non-attached way. So that's Jnana Yoga. It's the practice of understanding reality in its true form, understanding that our awareness, our consciousness is much more powerful than external events, which allows us to act then appropriately, like a Jnana Yogi.
Jnana Yogi. Well, I love the quote in the Upanishads where they say, there's two birds sitting in a tree. One bird is eating the bitter and sweet fruits of life, while the other bird is watching in non-attachment. And that's kind of what we want to have. We don't want to get rid of the world. We don't want to say, oh, the world's not real, it's an illusion, and I can go out and murder people and it won't matter, or steal from people. Like, it's not like that. But it's also that we want to be able to be in the world of duality, enjoy the ups and downs, enjoy the ride of life, and feeling like almost like kind of like the hidden our true power so we can discover it again. It's just like a hero's journey. But we also have that like pure awareness, that witness that's with us, that's our true nature, that we can always fall back into. And I remember one of the scariest parts of my life when we moved to New York, and I was starting over my business again, and I was a hypnotherapist in Denver and came here, and you were working, you were working in the child center. We weren't working together yet. And I was really worried about, like, can I really be successful? And I was like, I had a lot of anxiety, and all of a sudden I just fell back into this void of light, and it's like, this is who I really am. And it kind of gave me the strength to kind of go back into the world and then go and do my duty, do my sacred duty, which is play in this world of duality, but knowing that there's a safety net, basically. It's almost like being able to do all these tricks on the high wire, but know that there's a safety net. There's nowhere you can fall and be harmed or hurt. And that's that kind of invincibility that I think that will make life exciting. And also, we don't want to see the whole picture because we still want to play in the game. Don't you think?
Speak for yourself. I want to see the whole picture.
You want to see the whole thing.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying is, like, having it hidden a little bit gives us that ability to work with it.
Yeah, no, it is a personal choice. I mean, that's the whole idea of this knowledge, is it's meant to liberate you. It's not meant to restrict your actions or your power in the world. You can't do
certain things, and you gotta give up, or what do they give up life, give up the material life.
On the contrary, it is a moving towards life, towards experience.
Renunciate the world, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's not about renouncing the world. It is about understanding its true nature. Yeah. That way, you can really interact with it in an appropriate way. And so there's one yoga left that we still need to talk about, which is Raja Yoga. Which is the royal road to the unconscious, meditation.
Yes.
And that's coming up.
Is that what Raja means, royal?
Yes. Yes. And then we're thinking of talking a little bit about Buddhism. A lot of the people that we work with are into mindfulness, into Buddhist techniques and meditations. So that might be coming up after this series. Yeah,
so we have one more in the series. Next week we'll talk about Raja Yoga, the path of meditation. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for another soul session. And we will see you next week. In the meantime, embrace that higher knowledge, and remember that there's nowhere to fall. That's where I'm leaving you.
Stay well.